We have with us Kelly Vero, who's one of the OGs of the digital fashion world. And she's going to be talking about designing tomorrow. So that's closing the fashion gap with interoperability. And she's had a very unique experience of working not just with fashion and technology. She's also been in the gaming industry for the last 30 years. So she knows the insides of not just the gaming industry and the technology behind it, but also the culture that goes behind the entire gamer ecosystem and how gamers think and who are going to be these consumers of digital fashion. So she's going to be speaking, and she's consulted for many organizations, like you can see on the screen. Her passion lies in storytelling, pop culture, and she's an exceptional speaker. I heard her speak at the G Star in Busan. I was very lucky to hear her in person, and I think it's a great opportunity to hear her on this as well. So, Kelly, I'm going to pass the mic over to you, and I'm going to mute and stop sharing.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, and congratulations. It's a really big milestone that you've made. So I really wish you the best in this. I know what it's like to go through the rigmarole of trying to establish yourself as a bona fide organization. I want to talk to you today, though, about interoperability from the perspective of how you should use it in everything that you're doing, not just in the ideas or coming together as part of your brand new wearables working group. This digital fashion and wearables working group really does kind of spell a new era, which I think is a wind of change that's been coming for a really long time. So it's quite refreshing to see you all today. And hopefully you're going to get a lot out of this experience, especially if you've just woken up. These should really open your eyes with all of my acid pink and neon colours. I will give you a warning, though, there are no flashing lights. So you've got nothing to do apart from sit back and relax and probably come up with some questions if you have them. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, first of all. Hopefully you can, see my screen. So some of the objectives that I want to talk about today is about interoperability. And why should you care about interoperability? That's a really important one, because it's okay kind of saying, yeah, we need to be more interoperable, but why bother? If your business doesn't require interoperability, there's no need for it. Some metaverses and some businesses that service that marketplace don't actually need to be that interoperable, but we'll discuss that in a moment. How to KPI a moving target. This is a good one because everything that we're creating from today onwards is a moving target. Technology changes at such a rapid speed. How are we going to hang on to that thing that is really important to our business, our use cases, and our models? And then best practice in digital fashion. Wow, this is great because interoperability is all about bringing this together. And then finally, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we've been able to service the marketplace over at Naked. So let's get started. This is me. I am responsible for probably quite a lot of the video games that either your parents told you to stop playing or that you tell your kids to stop playing now. Yes, that's my fault. And if you are a person who procrastinates rather than plays, playing is good. You should also play video games. But I haven't just made video games. These are some of the biggest titles that I've worked on. In fact, the most grossing downloaded game of all time is Subway Surfers, which I worked on for 2 years as COO of the company also. But I've also worked for Sotheby's and JP Morgan, IWC, Schaffhausen. You may notice a few of the brands, power brands on there that are pretty important to maybe some of the research that you're undertaking or some of the things that you're going through. I'm going to show you some of the first projects that I worked on in digital fashion when I transitioned through video games and into digital fashion to where I am today at Naked. So I'm going to give you a few little secret bits of hints and tips and information that you might not get from anywhere else. You're only going to get them from me making loads of mistakes. So what is interoperability and why should you care? Interoperability is, you all know, the sort of collaborative process with which tools, pipelines, systems, software, etc. comes together. and makes this beautiful world that we have of not just technology, but now this incredible metaverse where we can fit every single vertical into a space, and we can do a variety of different tasks and have amazing experiences all at the same time. You know, it started not just recently, which was pre-pandemic, but also it started way, way back in the 1990s. My first game was Tomb Raider in 1992 was when I started working on that game. And already we started to think about creating persistent universes with which Lara Croft could be continuously playing inside caves when you weren't there. Persistence is a really important part of interoperability because it's about breathing life into what it is that we create, how we collaborate, and the tools that we use. So it's not just about these things you see on the screen here. It can't just be about output and throughput. It also has to be about what happens when that item becomes digital. What happens if that item then becomes physical? How are we going to balance those bits and pieces? Sorry, did somebody have a question? Nope. I just heard a little noise. So when you're thinking about that kind of stuff and you're building out what your KPIs might be for building interoperability, properties, but more importantly, in this case, objects. I'm going to come at this from an object perspective rather than any other interoperable focus that you might currently find. Those objects for me are digital fashion wearables, but also the avatar. And now, as Aditya said at the top of the conversation, we met in Busan and I talked heavily about the interoperability of avatars. And I'll cover that again at the end because I think it bears repeating of how important the avatar is to this entire process. But if you're KPIing a moving target, we're talking about technology which is moving at a speed that we just can't cling on to. So some of those KPIs might include asset transfer, but they're not necessarily going to be in a traditional sense, which is why having a standards group is important, but also it has to be iterative. The entire interoperable process is about being as iterative, fluid, and as alive as you can possibly make everything that you're creating. So you might want to include user identity management, so PI type stuff, but also information exchange, communication and collaboration. I didn't mention it when I was showing you the games and businesses that I've worked with in the past, but I'm actually a currently serving member on the IEEE. And I'll explain the IEEE and my relationship to it in a moment. But the IEEE is hugely focused on interoperability. They're trying to create standards which move with the times. So they're trying to be a standard organization that is kind of enhancing its potential inside the movement of technology, rather than just saying, here is the benchmark, we're just going to make to this. Communication and collaboration is very important, but so is economic integration. You know, can we assume that everybody can afford to buy a digital garment? Well, we should. If we're not, and we're trying to make garments elitist or for a certain sector of society, then we've lost a huge amount of marketplace that we could service. The same goes for legal and ethical considerations. Everything that I build, I try to make sure that it meets the tech gap, the poverty gap, and so much more importantly, the future gap, because we have to think not what we're doing 6 months from now, but what we might be doing 6 years from now. And are these things that we're creating ready? I'll show you an example of that in a moment. I created a few years ago an NFT standard with the IEEE. And when I created this standard, I wanted to look at objects from the perspective of 4 very clear components: the format of the object, but probably starting with the dimension. You know, what is its volume? What is its shape, size? I needed to know what that information was, because I felt that NFTs at the time in 2021, when I created the standard, that that a lot of NFTs were baseless, they were worthless. And one of the reasons why they were worthless was because they carried no metadata whatsoever. So I started to design what the perfect metadata would be, and I created a white paper. And this white paper contained the dimensional information, the format, so how could it be exported, and who would be able to receive it, and what would that look like. And unfortunately, I only have 40-ish minutes today to be able to speak, but I've done a great deal of research in this space, and I'm one of the leading thinkers on these particular items and components that make up not just NFT, but digital objects as a whole. Then the value, I created an algorithm which would be able to calculate what the value of a handbag would be like today, but also 10 years from now. And again, that was very prescient for its time, because I think we were using market analytics to be able to calculate how much a bag would be worth as a physical item. And I was suggesting what that bag might be worth as a digital item. So being able to put value on something like an NFT now is really important to be able to enhance or populate or support and sustain what the technology will be like in the future. Additionally, the DRM, the ownership, the creativity is one part, but the IP ownership is an altogether different legal specification that we have to adhere to. Oh, and here you can see two of my super objects. One on the left is the Alexander McQueen Spring Summer 2023 men's, and on the right is one of my naked models, an early R&D piece that went directly into Call of Duty, I think. So here we have really lovely, and I hope it works. No, it didn't work. I wanted to be able to show you the 3D object itself. This is a 3D object in this state. And this 3D object is quite interesting because it's a living document. I've done it again. And I'd love to be able to show it to you, but you can zoom into it. You can have a look inside it. You can look at the patterner. You can have a look at the finishing, the trim. Everything is in a great deal of depth, up to 60%. Why did I want to zoom into an object or an artifact for 60%? Because my client at the time, Louis Vuitton, wanted to ensure that there was provenance that was associated with what it was that I was creating as a digital object. Why is this important? Because metadata is interoperable. In order to be able to find out the provenance of a garment, we have to go through a process of being able to analyze and understand the data that goes into the object itself. So forget about PLMs, forget about product data and SKUs, forget about any old bits of information that's given to you when you're building digital objects. The really key things that you should be looking at the object on its own at the time that it's being created is the object itself. Can you authenticate this item of clothing, this garment, this piece of apparel or accessory? And if you can't, you need to be able to find a way to do that, first of all, because that ticks the box of the DRM part, which is the IP, the provenance, the understanding of the fact that it's not counterfeited, for example. I know the difference now between a counterfeited and a real Louis Vuitton handbag. And trust me, it's not in the monogram and the pattern. That's not what Louis Vuitton's interested in. They're interested in the material makeup and the formation and fiber of every single handbag. The icing on the cake, obviously, is the IP because it's part of their brand. But the actual knowledge about real Louis Vuitton handbags is being able to break them apart. Same with the Valentino dress. But you don't need to do that while you're using new technology. We have LiDAR scanning equipment. We can, well, what we do at Naked is we scan from product and SKU information, but you can also put things through an MRI scanner or a basic X-ray machine and be able to pull point cloud data out pretty easily. Just remember that if that object is a living document, you should be able to measure and take all of the information you need to then pack that information back into that interoperable object, and that will be carried either in a digital wallet or on some other distribution platform with all of that information retained. So understanding your items is a big part of writing your KPIs as a business or as someone who is designing objects. With this handbag, I was able to look at whether this was digitally sustainable. Yes, it is, because I created it knowing full well exactly the amount of carbon footprint I was putting into it. I actually baked it into the metadata, and that it's responsibly sourced. The information that I received from the point cloud data converted into information that was authenticated by Louis Vuitton themselves. Additionally, I could look at what the stitch style was, the chap or studding protocols, the leather piping, you name it. So with that in mind as a KPI, you can really start to build what your product will look like now and how that product will eventually distribute. Remember, I talked about format earlier. That's your distribution key. And that's why this white paper that I created in 2021 is so important. Also, I don't mind talking about any of this stuff because a lot of the things that I've created have either been standardized or patented. So I have no problem speaking about them. But applying that to the best practices in digital fashion is a different beast, because we've got to do away with this process of linear production. Digital production is all about being non-linear. It's about creating, kind of, as I said before, like a moving target, moving in the direction of technology rather than waiting for the next logistical moment to happen in the product life cycle. So digital design has now been introduced into quite a lot of atelier and fashion houses worldwide. If digital design and the tools that you're building are interoperable, then the interoperability part here is the format. So somebody said to me today, oh yeah, you know, Clo 3D is a standardized format. No, it isn't. It isn't at all. Standardized formats are formats for the endpoint of the object itself, not for the software tool. It's just a software brand. You could create anything that you see in Clo using everything from Autodesk, you know, to Unreal Engine. So I don't kind of get too caught up in, oh, we must use this type of software. The application of the software is important, but the pipeline of the outcome or the distribution has to adhere potentially to good standards and good practice in digital design. I only know this because I've worked in video games for 30 years and I've seen the way that we've moved in the direction of technology and how standards have changed. Back in my day, there weren't ISOs for creating specific objects, but today in video games, there are indeed ISOs for using specific tools. Again, if you have any questions about that at the end, I'd be happy to answer them. So virtual sampling became a really big thing during the pandemic, but I think that we didn't use virtual sampling enough to be able to ascertain whether this was a solid use of us as creators. And by us, I mean you and me, all of us together that are creating interoperable assets. These interoperable assets for virtual sampling are doing the job of carbon miles and footprint. They're doing the job actually of landfill and waste recycling. And I'll talk about those laws and bits and pieces that are incoming in 2024 that you need to be aware of. Finally, PLM. As I said before, if you're putting all of the metadata into the object, what on earth do you need a spreadsheet for? Spreadsheets are so a million years ago. So let's not move with those times because that's in the past. Instead, let's take a look at how we can do direct development using the object as its actual in situ PLM. How are we going to build logistics out of this particular object? And how are we going to make those logistics interoperable? What we need is less of a fragmented data approach, which we might find if we work with, oh yeah, I'm building my shoes in Rhino 3D, but also I'm using Lectra and Gerber. Some of these CAD operations are not speaking to each other because they're in direct competition with one another. So until we have an open forum, excuse the pun, to be able to ensure that we are working collaboratively exactly how we want to see direct digital development happen, there's a lot of things that we need to change. And we won't be able to move away from the spreadsheet until that moment happens, in fashion especially. Here's a workflow that we use in Naked. We receive the SKU and the URL. We pop it into our Naked machine. I know that Aditya wants me to explain everything that's inside that machine, but I'll give you a basic rundown. We use AI, and that AI goes out and finds two things. It finds information about that particular SKU, and the other part of the machine creates the mesh while it's looking. So the mesh actually exists from a variety, thousands, millions of data sets about digital fashion that have been created from CAD over the last 25, 30 years. What our test does, if you like, is send a search bar out to try and find as much information, inclusive of sizing, problems with product, quality, anything that we can build to be able to create metadata around that particular object. And then we bake that information into the mesh itself using AI. So we don't actually use generative AI. It's really important to say that because it's a very, big buzzword at the moment. And yeah, it's labor saving, but actually what generative AI does is it can create pretty poor quality meshes that need to be fixed. So instead, in our business, we have a technical director, and that tech lead literally does the work alongside the AI. So what he does is he assembles references, textures, information. The AI pulls the rest of the information from a variety of different areas on the web. It could be from previous seasons, it could be from sales, it could be from current season information. So for example, one of our clients is Net-a-Porter, and they have seasons upon seasons of information that we can just tap into using web searching. And then it brings all that information in and has a specific requirement of how it builds that metadata. A little bit like how you'd build a bill of material, but it's doing it for the mesh and the texture to give the other part of the engine the opportunity to create the perfect item based on what that product SKU code actually is. Then the digital item is created, half using generative AI, but mostly, as I said before, using humans, because humans have the best eye currently. We are not advanced enough to train data sets yet in creating perfect cloth simulation. I've seen some cloth simulations today on LinkedIn. I was very disappointed. We work with Adobe to try and improve cloth simulation all the time at Naked by feeding back constantly on data sets. Then we do the QA, which is human QA, and then we do the file distribution. And what we do is we export to every single standardized format. So that could be from FBX to GLB, GLTF, and we do it all in one go. And that takes maybe through that workflow, possibly around about a day. We want to be able to get that down to about 4 hours because it's more agile to be able to manage and maintain that. But certainly by the time we get to file distribution, we know whether we've got a quality piece of work or whether we've got to go back to the drawing board. And so far, we haven't gone back to the drawing board once. This is just one example of millions of workflows, but they are very important for you to be able to build out what you see your studio looking like in terms of throughput of not just bulk items, but quality items. There has to be your own quality standards in place inside your business. We have ours. I think that quite a lot of developers are doing it wrong currently. They're choosing pretty heavy meshes. I have a hatred towards people who create metallic wings. And one of the reasons why is because they render so badly on mobile. So what I try to do is when I'm building things, having a games background, I try wherever possible to ensure that I can utilize game thinking in what it is that I'm building. So that means I'm build for mobile first, and I kind of measure twice and cut once. So I'll create the object in an FBX because it's the highest, biggest quality that I can find that incorporates all of the things that I need, from texture to metadata. And then I'll scale it down to mobile. I will not build GLB, GLTF first, ever, ever, ever. However, I have seen a lot of people, especially the Louis Vuitton game from a couple of years ago, simply load FBXs into their applications. This does not make for an interoperable experience. Distribution of formats is where it's at in terms of good experience of distribution platforms. I mean, that makes a high quality product. So over texturing, that's not cool either. Texture for the distribution point. Do not texture for Princess Diana's wedding dress, you know? I mean, that's so intricate that we're never going to be able to sort of recapture that unless it, especially not in mobile, unless mobile phones improve in their sort of render speed. When you feel your mobile phone in your hand burning up, by the way, that's the render of every single little item, image, and piece of data that you're running at that time inside a game, for example. So when you say, "Ooh, my phone's really hot," it's not a good game that you're playing, just as a rule of thumb. And then the experience gap. Do you have people in your business that understand interoperability? And if they do understand interoperability, are they experts in their particular quality field? So in the past, I have used just artists that are texture artists, but also I've tried to use now a mixture of mesh artists and texture artists, because I have quite a lot of point cloud data that I need to make sure is of a very high quality and standard. There's nothing worse than a broken mesh. And then finally, on the other side of your pipeline, you should be looking at poor renders. I mean, this is just an awful try on here. The picture that I give you in the middle, the ring doesn't fit, it's not anchored to the finger correctly. The specularity of the object is horrendous. So this could take an artist, if they are inexperienced, up to 2 months to create something with that exact specularity. But if you surround yourself by experts, and I'm the most stupidest person in our entire organization, I surround myself with geniuses, because I want everything that we create to be amazing. So don't give yourself such a long lead time to be able to create things. Find experts and expertise that will be able to move you forward quickly. And then finally, bad physics. If things don't anchor properly, if things don't sit right, if things are you know, bouncing around, if meshes are broken, it's very obvious, it looks terrible. So this could really affect your pipeline moving forward, and therefore the offset of that is, or the offshoot of that is, that it affects all of your KPIs. So you can't hit any of those targets that you've set for yourself. So my advice here is for you to probably look at the possibility of, and I'll show you a few of the bits and pieces that we've done here, of building a design phase inside your business to be able to create maximum interoperability from innovation. Have a quality control phase and an evaluation phase. These phases are really important, and the sooner that you can shorten that time between those areas, the better opportunity and chance you have at developing a very strong interoperable brand. The ability to be able to distribute quickly is one of the key foci of what it is that we do in interoperability, whether we're creating something for digital wallets, or whether we're creating NFTs or snap lenses or something for video games. We have to ensure that all of that documentation we have inside our business in understanding, and I have every single game distribution element for assets and weapons and immovable objects and physics and collisions, etc. I have all of those papers inside our business, and I'm able to connect every single one of the items and garments that we create against the benchmarks of those papers for those particular games, IPs, studios, end users. So what's coming in 2024? Some big stuff. P3141. I hope you've all heard of it. Probably some of you that I'm speaking to right now are part of the IEEE group. P3141 is the ultimate avatar standard. It will have some fantastic fit mechanics inside it. It's got great measurement anchor points. It is just a beautiful paper and will be an incredible standard, which includes PI. It is very focused on every single aspect of you as a physical human using yourself as an interoperable object. So your measurements will pass into something that's digital, and you should be able to carry that avatar around with you for the rest of your life. You will just simply need to update. If in my case, you ate a lot over the holiday period, you just need to update your avatar based on what your current fit, size, or requirements are. So it's going to make avatars very, very simple, and it will be adopted by most video games and most metaverses, I understand, and most endpoints in terms of physical consumption or garment technology. So you will start to find these avatars in everywhere from Gerber to Electra to Browseware, but then also in Call of Duty, also in Sandbox, also in, you know, Snapchat probably. The next one is Waste Framework Directive. If you can use interoperability to cut waste, then you've won the game. You've won at doing digital fashion and wearables. One of the key directives of 2023 was being able to bring in this law which stops landfill and waste. If we go digital first and you put yourselves first as being the sort of key focal point for businesses worldwide to use your service, and you can service interoperably perfectly, we won't need to bring framework directives in about waste and landfill. And then finally, the textile labelling regulation, look out for that. It comes at the end of 2024, the last quarter, I believe, and there will be a requirement on everybody that is doing digital to physical. You will still have to label. That includes my metadata, in actual fact. I've just got a couple more things I want to show you, and that is some of the stuff that we do and some of the stuff that we have done. We sell all of our garments for $5 inside video games, and with that we're able to do a revenue share, and that revenue share is nothing at all, but it does so much for brands to be able to get their items into video games, because it's brand awareness and exposure that they wouldn't have ordinarily had. We can also do cloth simulation in GLB and GLTF. So that's an example of GLTF cloth simulation. It's quite nice because it went into the Metaverse Fashion Week, which I don't know about you, was absolutely dreadful. But it gives you a really good idea. This is the Wednesday collection. It gives you a good idea of how we build clothing and garments inside our business. We currently service 30 power brands. We've got 10 video games that we service and 10 metaverses worldwide. And finally, I released a book at the close of the year, which Aditya kindly bought, which is From Pixels to Portals, and it helps you to be able to understand interoperability across verticals for the metaverse, using video games as the backdrop and canvas for how everything should be built inside technology. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty available. You can also send me an email, and you can follow me at the Kelly Vero or naked_XYZ on X. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. If anyone does have any questions, this would be a good time to put it in the chat. Or if anyone would like to unmute and ask a question, that's okay as well.
Yes, this is Kim Wales. I just want to ask Kelly, first of all, the presentation was phenomenal. So thank you so much for sharing all of that information. You mentioned you had a white paper that you wrote. Is there a way that we can gain access to the white paper?
Yeah, I'll share the link with Aditya, and he can distribute it afterwards, so you can have a good rummage inside there.
Terrific.
We'll try to put it in the meeting notes, and we'll probably send it out on email as well. I had a couple of questions and comments, Kelly. One was, of course, the standard that you created for the NFT. So we're also we're two working groups. So we have an avatar working group, and we've got a digital fashion working group, and the two are supposed to work very closely. And they're also building a use case matrix and a translation framework. One thing that we did focus on as a kind of a de facto standard that works for metaverses is the VRM standard. So it's not really a standard. VRM is a format which is used by VR chat and VC face. And the fact that it, Decentraland and a whole lot of these metaverses are now coming up with a VRM import, we just figured it because it's built on GLTF and it's got a lot of metadata on it. So does the standard that you worked on and the standard that you worked on for the NFT, does that is it in the lines of VRM, or would there be some kind of because I do realize that VRM also has a lot of metadata in it. So would you be using the same kind of tags, or would it be something
Well,
different?
I think it's going to have even more, because obviously a VRM avatar is not going to be as in depth as a garment focused avatar. So this particular standard with our wearables working group is for physical and digital. So the idea is that if we measure ourselves from head to toe, every single dimension, we should be able to place that into digital seamlessly. An avatar should be created for us using that information, but it's never been that simple. So even if we talk about VRM, one of the sort of big problems is the fact that we have screen resolution issues. So VRM allows you to have a certain amount of tolerance within that. I'm being really, really technical now. But on the avatar, the P3141 avatar side, what that will allow you to do is have much more measurement tolerances. And so though that will still be affected to a certain extent, I don't know if you've seen Ready Player Me's and how they work across different platforms, they don't all look the same. And VRMs, they try to, but still we are reliant upon the technology that's powering what it is that we've created. Well, what we'll find with P3141 is that we're not so reliant on the technology, because the technology will already be embedded as metadata. It's how we export that avatar, and that avatar export has not been decided yet. So if it decides to export as a VRM, that'll be fantastic. And I hope that that's true, but that should come out in the next couple of weeks. And I think one of the things that we wanted to do was not be so prescriptive in terms of where the avatar is distributed, and how the more important thing for our working group was that we wanted to see how the information in the avatar could be carried. It's the metadata that is more important than, what different configurators there are for skin tones or eye color or hair color. It's more important to know, can we measure from the shoulder to the breast? Can we measure from the armpit effectively? And how do we put those measurements into an available kind of vessel, if you like?
Yeah, makes sense. And did your working group interact with the MPEG avatar? Because we did get a presentation on the other working group about the MPEG avatar, and I think they've done a lot of work very similar to what seen as the codec avatar. So is there going to be an intersection between P3141 and the MPEG avatar?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, they tend to do sort of talk to each other. So we've gone through 18 months worth of revision now on the paper. To give you some idea, it's taken 3 years to get to this place. So yeah, we still have a few ways to go, I think. I keep saying it's coming out in a few weeks, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that.
Yeah, no, but thank you for the presentation. And I do would like to extend an invitation to your organization, Nikit, if you'd like to join Metaverse Standards Forum, or you'd like to join our group, or you'd like to nominate someone from your organization to join, because it would make a big difference to our group as well. And the other thing is that if you do want to recommend a speaker from either the IEEE group or someone else, we'd be happy to put their names down and call them as a speaker and have them showcase what is it that they've done.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be amazing. I've really enjoyed the warm welcome here. It's been a really nice run up as well. And I'm very grateful to you for inviting me to do the inaugural. I hope I haven't let anybody down. I was really hoping to do a super presentation today to really kickstart your working group with some vigor and vim. So I hope I've managed to do that for you today.
Yeah,
You were fantastic, Kelly. Fantastic. Thank you. And I
Thank
cannot
you.
wait for these standards to come to the real world as well. I'm
Oh,
so
yeah.
fed up with all these different sizes of quotes. I mean, unbelievable.
Absolutely.
So if we
I
can
mean,
transfer that from the real world after we
let's keep everything
establish all the
crossed.
standards, yeah, that would be great.
Well, I wish you a really great start to the rest of your brand new working group. I think it's really fantastic, and I hope to be able to join you again as an actual delegate in future. So it would be great to work with you again. Thank you so much for your time. And if anybody has any more questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You know where to find me. I'm pretty much everywhere.
You can place your LinkedIn link here in the chat, Kelly, so that we can connect with you.
Yeah, okay, I can do that. Oh, yeah. Everybody talk amongst themselves.
Kelly, can I ask you one more question? This is Kim
Sure.
Wales again. In the Waste
Hi.
Framework Directives 2023 that's scheduled to come out, is there going to be any information around carbon capture, like cap and trade information in that document, and how that's going to be associated to the wearables or the digital avatars?
I think that I can actually pop something in here now about the waste framework directive, and that will give you a really good rundown of because it covers all waste and recycling, not just fashion waste, and that's what's really important here. Because a lot of people think that fashion was going to get its very own. It's actually getting textile labeling, which would be its own sort of focus point, but certainly, yeah, there will be sort of carbon capture information inside that framework directive. Also, it should be part of everybody's ESG. I know there's a lot of controversy because people lie about it quite a lot. Big corporations tend to lie about their carbon capture and what they're doing with carbon generally in terms of landfill, but that should give you a good idea for discussion points. Or
I thank you. Thank you so much.
thank you, Kim. Thank you. Is there anything burning before I disappear and let you do your thing?
No, I was wondering if you've, since you're working on the waste side of things, have you heard about a company called Tukatech, and they have a software called
Yeah, yeah, took a second. Very well known. Yeah.
So I think they've focused on being factory first, because they came up as factory automation software. And I think one thing that they do talk about is that the 2D patterns that come out of their systems are more efficient. They try to cover every square inch for, like, a little piece of the collar or a piece of the label. They try to fit it in so that you take the minimum amount of garment that's cut for the 2D pattern. And I think that's something they do pride themselves with, that they feel they're better than Gerber and Lectra and some of those.
But that's great. But remember that all interoperability is about collaborative software. So the more that we're collaborative with software, the more that we're going to be collaborative in terms of distribution. That's the key to interoperability as I see it, rather than just sort of saying we are going to use this proprietary format to export our documentation or our avatar or our garment into. Instead, what we should be focusing on is what is the best device format for that particular device, or what is the best distribution format for that particular distribution. And I think that's what we've always tried to pride ourselves on at Naked, is really not restricting ourselves to it, because, you know, I want my things, my items to be in Browseware. I want to see my digital items inside catalogs over at Tukatech or in Clo3D. Why can't that happen if I have a partnership? It just makes the process even longer when we could actually just be so streamlined and much faster.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I wish you a really great rest of your meeting.